That's been an adventurous morning.
Sounds like it. Part of it was caused by me.
Oh, my God.
God bless you.
Ah, you can tell it's
All right,
springtime,
now we'll
can't
be
you?
moving into performance work statements. So, performance work statements are a way of doing performance-based contracting. And performance-based contracting means that contractors are getting, that the government gets what the government is paid for. So it's really a way of holding contractors' feet to the fire more stringent than typical proposals, because basically you are evaluated on the performance in very extensive way. So the first thing to keep in mind is we're talking about the requirements section. So remember how we talked about sections A through M, and the requirements were in section C. So section C is what we're talking about. And if those requirements aren't right, what do you think happens?
You can't price it correctly, or you're going to wind up with the wrong product.
Right? So contractors can't price it correctly, you're going to end up with the wrong product. What else? Users are dissatisfied, the system doesn't work as well. So you think about the basic problems that get in the way if the requirements aren't right, and then you add to it that the government has to make sure that they're being fair to all competitors as part of them doing business with government, which isn't what you have to do in running your own commercial businesses, right? You don't necessarily have to be fair to anybody. You don't have to pay attention to socioeconomic concerns. None of that is relevant. You know, you don't have. You could if you want to be good corporate citizens, but not any requirement where the government actually has to do that. It also helps. They have to be able to run an efficient and effective competition. So they want to make sure that they get these requirements written right, so that it's fair to parties, and it presents a level playing field for everybody. Okay, so I will tell you, I teach doctoral students. And by the time they get to me, they should have completed all these years of education, and they should have been able, they would have had to have written papers and, done all this stuff in terms of logical thinking and critical thinking and been able to research and stuff like that. I will get dissertations that are just, there's a strong problem in our nation with writing skills. And, if I'm seeing it in the academic area at the termination point, which is what a doctoral degree program is, if they're not writing correctly, God help the rest of us, right? So my point in telling you that is that just like, I'm sure there are people in this room, some feel very comfortable with writing, some not so much. Some are really good writers, some not so much. We've got the full bailiwick. On the flip side, the government has the same exact issue. Some contracting officers, some technical people can really write statements of work and performance work statements that are really clear and concise and give you exactly what you need to know to be able to price the deal and so that they can get what they want. And some can't write a sentence to save their soul. So my point is that part of the issue in requirements writing from the government's perspective is just this national problem that we tend to have with writing. The second problem is that you've got these RFP documents being written by different people. So you look, just like we have the same issue on our side with writing proposals by different people, it sounds like it was written by different people, and there are disconnects between things. You'll see that on RFPs too, because the government's doing it the same way we're doing it. So it's really important that the requirements are right, because there's no way you can get a solution that's right if the requirements are. But yet you still have all these writing issues and being written by a committee that are inherent into the system. Other things that get in the way, perceptions. If I'm an incumbent, I'm going to see the way I see things, versus if you're trying to get into the government agency that I'm currently working in, you're going to have a different perspective. So our perceptions are going to be different. There's this notion of the drafter of the contract, and I mentioned this the first week, but when we think about contract law, whoever drafts the contract is responsible for any errors or omissions. So if I'm the government, and I write an RFP, and I write a statement of work that sounds very directive, contractor shall do this, contractor shall do that, I am the drafter of the contract, which means if there are any errors or omissions, it's my problem to fix. So that's another issue. Procurement Integrity Act. Don't allow us to speak much with each other during this process, because the government wants to keep this perception of being fair and open to everybody. So that becomes a stumbling block for requests for proposals, particularly statements of work, because they can't talk to us and we can't talk to them. So if we don't understand a requirement that they haven't written very well, we really don't, we have the first 10 days to get clarification, and that's it. And then misconceptions, as I mentioned, the Mythbusters numbers yesterday. Okay, so what the government came up with is this notion of, okay, let's see if we can work together more hand in glove with contractors during this process. So they came up with this notion of performance-based contract. So if you think about sections A through M, and you get to section C is the statement of work in traditional contracts. That's what we've been talking about so far, right? And that statement of work establishes and defines all non-specific specification requirements for contractors' efforts, either directly or with the use of specified cited documents. So they might say, you have to comply with ANSI standard 7601, and you go off to ANSI standard 7601 to figure out what you have to do. Or they tell you specifically how they want the work done. That's what a statement of work is. A performance work statement is a type of performance-based contracting. Performance-based means they're going to pay you if you're helping them move towards their objectives. If you're not helping them move towards their objectives, you're not going to get paid. So what a performance work statement does is it says, we, the government, need you to provide lighting in this room, right? And we know you're the lighting experts, and we know you're going to know better ways to do lighting than we, the government, are, because we don't have people to focus on this because we've already made our make or buy decision. We've decided to buy. So we've already cried uncle and said this is your game. So if I write these lights up as a RFP, statement of work requirement, I'll say you need this type of light. It needs to be spaced at this distance apart, and I'm very structured about how it's all going to be, how it needs to be done. When I write it as a performance work statement, I'll say you need to provide 100 lumens of light in this room. And I don't care whether you use sunlights, I don't care if you use like globe lights, I don't care if you have mood lighting, it doesn't matter what to me you have going on, as long as when I walk in the room with a light meter, I'm going to get 100 lumens of light. If I don't get 100 lumens of light, it's your nickel to fix it, to get to 100 lumens. Meaning I'll only pay you for performance if you do exactly what I need you to do. In a statement of objectives, the government puts together a document incorporated in the solicitation that provides overall performance objectives. It's used when the government intends to provide maximum flexibility to each offer to propose an innovative approach and establishes a broad description of required performance objectives. So they try to leave it as open-ended as possible for you to be as innovative as possible. Because you know yourselves, for things that you do, if you make something at your company that you use in your home, like let's say you are lighting providers, and you have to light your rec room. You know which are the good manufacturers to use. You know which are going to give you the long haul. You know if you have kids and they bounce around balls, if you're going to be durable. You know all those things, and you're going to put in the best lighting solution, most cost-effective lighting solution that you can possibly put in. That's what the government wants you to do for them with this whole performance base. So if you think about it, when the government does a statement of work with requirements issued by the government has issues if there's any problem. Over here, when the government issues the statement of objectives or the performance work statement, and it's combined with what the contractor's going to do, it's much more of a collaborative type effort. And if there are any problems, you need to fix them. So statements of work, so those are the three things we're talking about. Statements of work, and most agencies don't use those SOOs, SOOs, statement of objectives, they tend to use performance work statements. So you have performance work statements and statements of work. Statements of work are used for more traditional procurements. That's the way the government used to do things. They specify, the government specifies the processes, how you need to do things, and what methods you need to use. It describes what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. Very detailed descriptions on how you're going to do the work. Due to the amount of detail, the government basically gives you what the preferred way of getting it done. So they're basically directing you to do your work. And then if the contractor does exactly what the government specifies and the result is unacceptable, the government pays to fix it. So if I put these lights in exactly the way you want them, and you come in with a light meter and you say, you know what, this is 50 lumens worth of light, and I would really like 60 lumens of light. You know, people really need 60 lumens of light to be able to see the text that they're reading in these classes. Then that's the government's issue, and they have to pay for you to fix that. Any questions on statement of work? So the way statements of work are organized, or are supposed to be organized, and again, we go back to those writers that are all over the place, they should provide you a general description of requirement and background. So in the first section of the statement of work, there should be this is who we are, what we do, and what we're trying to do with this procurement. So they should provide you that background. Then they should provide you a scope that gives you a non-technical sketch of the nature of what's required by this acquisition. So basically, what is it that they're trying to provide? They're trying to provide a taxpayer's payer system, or they're trying to provide a purchasing system, or a can of paint, or whatever it is that they're trying to do. And then they get into the task requirements. So this is all the detailed work that has to be performed during the period of performance. We talked about the period of performance from the start date of the contract to the end date of the contract. So what do you have to do during that time? So they'll give you delivery dates for each key result or task. They'll tell you if it's a firm fixed price, what the level of effort is that's required. You know, you're going to need to provide help desk support 24/7, and you need to have at least 10 people on the help desk. They'll give you that degree of specificity. The amount of travel anticipated or required, so that you can price it in there, and they'll tell you your reporting requirements. So any kind of deliverables that you have to produce, they'll tell you. They also tell you what the end product looks like, the final product that you actually submit to the government. So what does the product need to look like, etc. But it doesn't contain any measurable performance standards. So you either meet the requirement or you don't meet the requirement. So if you think about it as the Ten Commandments, why would I say that it's like the Ten Commandments? Right. And they used to be written like this: thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that. Or, you know, contractor shall. It was always written kind of in that commandment tone. A statement of work is one of the features of performance-based acquisition. It basically provides the top level objectives to an acquisition. So this is basically what we're trying to accomplish here. It's in section C. The section C isn't a statement of work. It's a statement of objectives in this type of procurement. It offers the flexibility to develop cost-effective solutions and propose innovative alternatives to meet the objectives. So you can propose whatever you want. Which do you think is easier to grade? Something that's a performance work statement or some statement of objective, or the other alternative, a statement of work? Pure government evaluator, which is easier to evaluate. Yeah, why? Exactly. So if I look at proposals that were statements of work, you're all going to look pretty much the same, right? Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this, and this is how I'm going to do it, or how you want me to do it, and I'm going to comply. Whereas with a performance work statement or statement of work, I just set out this broad statement of what it is I'm trying to accomplish, and you tell me how to do it. So it's almost like the difference between a true-false test of a statement of work versus an essay. You have a blank sheet if you're ever anything. It allows the government to assess offers' understanding, so given the fact that it's this essay, if I'm the evaluator, I can look at your stuff and say, yeah, they know what they're talking about, or you know they're clueless. Because you're not just parroting back my language of a statement of work, right? Saying, yes, I'll do it. In this case, you're doing it. It requires competing contractors to develop a performance work statement. In other words, this is the specific work I'm going to perform in answer to your statement of work. Performance metrics. Here's my recommendation, contractor, to you, government, of how you should measure me. So think of an example of something like if you go into a restroom and you see a login sheet of every time the restroom is cleaned. That's an example of a performance work statement metric. So the contractor said, we will sign off every time we clean the restroom. And then the government contracting officer representative can walk into any restroom, see that sheet, and determine when the last time whether the bathroom is being cleaned to the standard. It might say that they have to clean the bathroom twice a day. They can look at that sheet and see that at least twice a day is cleaned. The measurement plan for how those measurements are going to be taken, and then the quality assurance plan. How does the government know that you're doing the work as intended? So that's called a cost. All these items, so this is all part of my solution to the government. And the government reviews all this to determine whether or not they think they can get an adequate sense of whether I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So they're using the data. I'm telling them where to look at me on this contract to figure out whether or not I'm doing things correctly. Now, they don't necessarily have to take my stuff that I submit lock, stock, and barrel. They could say, well, this one seems a little stringent. We're going to relax that a little bit. Or this one doesn't seem stringent enough. We're going to put more detail in. So they have the ultimate decision as to what gets decided, but that's how it works. The statement of work format, they still should be giving us a purpose of what it is they're trying to accomplish. They should tell us what the scope or the mission is of the organization, so we get a big picture perspective. They'll tell us the period of performance, start and end date, and they'll tell us the place of performance, where it's going to occur. They'll give us some of the background on the problem. And then and one of the things I teach contracting officers when I teach them how to write performance work statements or statements of objectives is to make sure they don't overwhelm us with detail. You know, we don't need to know the history of time to know that they have a problem with their watch battery today, right? So sometimes they tend to give us a lot of detail because somebody wants to vent and sort of, so-and-so would have done their job and we wouldn't have this situation. You know what I mean? They try to give you all, and quite honestly, what does that do for us? What do we need this information for? It's not applicable, and quite honestly, it may even throw us off as to what the real problem is, of what they're trying to say. So I always try to teach them to really be concise, and I give them very specific requirements to exercises to work through so that they can tighten them up. And then any other operating constraints.
You think with text messaging that's going to get easier to get them to shrink it up? Because, I mean, seriously, that's part of the problem. I know what you're right, because going back to hieroglyphics and writing on the side of the cave wall with emojis and whatever, and nobody knows really how to say anything.
Right.
Well, there's some people stupid enough you can hear them misspell words. So it's just a lack of concern or care for grammar, punctuation, spelling, whatever.
Well, and quite honestly, particularly text messaging, it's contrary to the way our brain operates. So our brain likes holistic things, and if there's a gap, we fill in the gap. So that's why our vision works. You know, logistically speaking, our brain shouldn't be working because one eye is seeing one set of things, but something inside is filling in those gaps where that minuscule amount of space that our eyes can't see at any point in time, it's filling all that in. Well, when we send a text and it autocorrects, we already have in our brain what we want to say. We're not even seeing errors in that text message, which is why it goes off with, crazy ass, people respond back with question marks, right? Because they don't know what we're talking about because it's autocorrected. Yeah, so, there's a lot to be said for that. And I think it's, I think it's a generational thing too, in terms of communicating. It's just a whole different model that we're going to have to sort of get it acclimatized to. All right, so the benefits of using this, it's harder for us initially, but we can come up with more innovative